So, welcome everybody to Film Murphy TV. I've got Ron Bowman here. We were interviewing in Annapolis, and we're here to talk. I asked Ron to come by and share a little bit about himself and his experiences with both triathlon and running over the past 20 years or so, correct?
A little more than that. Yeah, I've been running, my first marathon was in '82, so if you go back beyond that, it's a little longer than that.
Good, good. And so part of what we want to talk about today is I'm particularly interested in Ron's philosophy because Ron, you're 60 years old, right? Mm-hmm. And so he has said that he has voted that he's going to continue living a very active and athletic lifestyle, active lifestyle. And I'm particularly interested in what motivates him and what keeps him going. And so we're going to talk about what got him started. And then how he's working with people today in his career, in his job of working with people and coaching, and his general philosophy. So I thought we'd get started by just talking a little bit about how you got started and kind of what was the critical piece that pushed you over the edge and said, I'm going to live a life in a certain way that's going to incorporate my being athletic and being active and taking on marathoning and taking on triathloning.
Sure, Bill, and that's a topic that's close to my heart because it's kind of who I am when you talk about that. And just as some very basic background, I was born in Farmington, New Mexico, and raised on and near the Navajo Reservation there for the first 8 or 10 years of my life. So one of my earliest memories happens to be of running, and my dog Peppy and I would chase jackrabbits in the sagebrush there on the reservation. So running started out very early as just being, what we did. We didn't have go-karts or things like that at that time. I mean, we weren't necessarily poor, but didn't have a lot of the the media tools or things like that kids are involved with nowadays. And that just kind of kept going. And as most kids, everything that you did when you were a kid, you ran to it or from it or with it, or and the competition part of it kind of came in there, just like kids. They'd see who could be the first to the end of the block and back. And I found I had a little bit of talent there, so I made it even more enjoyable, just because like everybody you like to win. So if there's something you're good at, you want to do more of it. And then it was the same thing. It just kept being a part of what I did, whether it was to burn off excess energy as a kid or to relieve stress when I got into the Naval Academy, and just for general the fitness there. After graduation, it was the same thing. On long deployments, running laps around the deck. Running was always something I could fall back on to clear your head, regroup, dissipate some of that, the stress and that builds up during those situations. And I think that's similar to a lot of people. They channel it in different ways. I'll be the first to admit that being the child of an alcoholic parent, I knew, at an early age that I probably had, that tendency for a compulsive behavior. So when I was doing running and sports and things like that, it was kind of in the back of my mind. It was, well, it's better this than maybe taking a chance on it, going in a less productive direction. So even to this day, there's a little bit of humor behind it when my wife, tells me that I'm getting compulsive about training for something. I said, it's, at least it's something you know where I'm at. Even if I'm out on the streets, you know where I'm at. I'm not getting in trouble. So it's a philosophy that grew over a lot of years, and it wasn't really getting divergent until the 20s or 30s, about that time when young athletes start realizing they're no longer young athletes, and realizing that they're not as fast or can't jump as high or as much as they had, and they have to make a choice. There comes a moment when everybody makes a decision to in what direction they're going to go. And unfortunately, these days, too many of those high school athletes at whatever skill level take, and I think not necessarily the easy way out, but the most common way is focusing on the job and putting all their energies into the job or the career, or less constructive areas, drugs, alcohol, food, something like that, and that's where their energies start collecting, and then they get further away from those things that they enjoyed doing when they were kids, that kept them running and jumping, and that kid attitude that you had when it wasn't necessarily competition. It was just fun to do. So I kept doing that, and so running was always a part of that. Sports were always involved in that aspect of it. So on deployments, instead of going to the bar with my shipmates, I'd go for a run through the town and probably learn more about the culture that way than they did, and certainly had a lot of experiences that I wouldn't have had otherwise. The endurance part of it kind of came along as an attitude of, okay, I can do this, because I do 5Ks and I do some 10Ks. And then I was stationed in Florida, and one of my shipmates in the wardroom told me he was training for the Miami Marathon. And it was one of those, I looked at him and he was 10 or 20 pounds overweight, and I knew I was in better shape than him. I said, well, if he can do it, I can do it. So I started training on my own, no plan. They didn't have any training plans at that time. Jim Fixx wasn't even on the scene. If anybody remembers who Jim Fixx was, he was one of the leading first gurus of running. So I just kind of ran. I knew it was 26 miles. I knew I'd have to do that. And even then, I knew I'd have to pace myself. So I just, start running. And it kind of took the place of going to church with the family, which was fine. I had to explain that, to the kids. Well, this is kind of Daddy's church where he gets, some spiritual release. And actually, I think they kind of understood it, because they would actually run with me on some Sundays, which didn't go over real well with my wife at the time. And I trained, and then I got redeployed, and went to the New York Marathon as my first marathon. And I tell people now, when I coach them, I said, I know what it's like to do everything wrong in preparing for a marathon, because I've done it, over the years. If it can be done wrong, I've made the mistake. Fortunately, I think I've been able to learn from those mistakes and keep going. A lot of runners will burn themselves out literally in the first, event that they try to get to. So that's kind of the generation of the philosophy for the endurance aspect of it was. I can do that, and I enjoyed the training for it. And I describe it now to some of my athletes as it's like making a cake. The bulk of the work goes into the cake, the making of it. The putting the icing on it can be considered your the finish. Sure. And that's it's a goal, but it's not necessarily the only thing. I get as much enjoyment out of a race that I don't necessarily do that well in, but I finish it, and as the one that I get close to a PR. And so it's a lot deeper than times, PR times, or qualifying times. But I think it's a genesis thing, an evolution, because you kind of have to go through that phase to get to the phase where you accept it for whatever you get out of it, and realize that the journey is the benefit. And it's also a lot like life. I mean, there's ups and downs. You have good training days. You have good training years. You have good races. You have bad races. As you know, during a marathon, you can have ups and downs. And as long as you know if I can weather through this down period, there'll be, you know, an up period at the end of it. And you know, like life, you get the, you know, the downs that you've got to, you know, work your way through. So I think I like to think of my endurance training as a way of life and also a metaphor for just life in, you know, in general.